Somebody I like to bring on this show a lot just to talk about football, the landscape of the NFL in general, especially the draft, is JP ACOSTA, and that's who I am bringing on here today. JP, how are you feeling post-draft?
I'm so tired. I'm so tired. I was up until like 4 a.m. on the nights after night one and two, and then I was up on Saturday getting all the picks tracked for SB Nation, but I'm ready for a vacation.
Understandable. I am too. It's the pre-draft season is always long, but this has been an especially long one because it's been a pretty entertaining class with a lot of different debates to have within NFL spheres and larger things. It's been a fun one. But one of the things I think, outside of the larger narratives about the draft, right? The Shador Sanders of it all. One of the kind of things that I saw with this year's draft is two running backs go in the first round. They had a defensive tackle go in the top five. A lot of defense. I think three? Walter Nolan went in the first two as well. Deron Harmon, like
Malik Williams made four. There were five defensive tackles.
Yeah, five defensive tackles, two tight ends went in the first round, right? Couple running backs, a linebacker, a couple stand-up backers too, right? And Jalen Walker, depending on what you categorize him as, edge, stand-up guy, and then obviously Jahad Campbell as well. And then 33, first pick of the second round, ends up being a linebacker. I get the sense that the NFL is starting to churn that machine, not completely away from the quarterback position, obviously, but a lot of teams are figuring out, hey, if we don't have a top five guy, we have to find other solutions on offense that just don't revolve around the quarterback position. And it seems like a lot of teams are turning back to good old reliable, which is trench play.
Yeah, and I think part of it with this class, the running backs and tight ends going early is a reflection of the class that we are in. The running back class is really strong. We knew that going in. This tight end class is really strong. But I think with where the NFL is going, and I've always said football is cyclical, where the lighter boxes and the too high shells are great to stop the pass, but now offenses are trying to run more gap scheme, more power, more counter, get more at you in the run game. So I think we're starting to see that trend coming back, not necessarily in the like the workhorse running back getting 35, 40 carries a game like Sean Alexander in
Mm-hmm.
2007, but we're going to see a lot more of the run game have an emphasis in the NFL and stopping the run be huge going forward because of how defenses are structured and the body types that we're using to play.
Yeah. And another thing, right, with Schlesinger going 33, and this kind of flips back to the Browns. For the longest time, we've been seeing these smaller linebackers be drafted to be, these mics and everything else, and the position getting smaller. Walker, Walker is 6'2". He played a little edge, right? He's not a small guy
He's
at
like
the position.
245, 250.
Yeah, 245. And then, Campbell's around 235. And then Schlesinger played about 220 at 6'3", but came in measured in at like 240 at the combine, right? Mm-hmm. So it seems like there's a shift towards, hey, we might want to get these linebackers a little bit bigger, which switches to what the Browns did in that draft. They went tight end, two running backs, a defensive tackle, and a linebacker. What does that allocation of assets tell you about what the Browns feel like their plan is going forward?
First of all, they're punting on being a serious quarterback team in 2025. And I think it tells me that they're trying to be a little bit more physical up front. With their offense, when we think of Kevin Stefanski, we think of that wide zone, the outside zone scheme. But with a lot of their core outside zone guys getting older, with the way the NFL is changing defensively and in their structures, I think he's going to start shifting it more to more gap scheme, more power, more counter, more duo. And I think that's because when you add guys like Quinshawn Judkins and Dylan Sampson, who are really explosive gap scheme runners who don't really have the vision to run zone stuff, I think that kind of tells me they want to be physical. They want to try and mash you and beat you down on both sides of the ball, which I think has been kind of their MO on the defensive side of the ball. They've been fast, they've been incredibly physical, and I think that just reinforces it with Schlesinger and Mason Graham. But on offense, I'm really curious to see how the blend of Tommy Reese's offense at Alabama meshes with Kevin Stefanski and kind of what their goal is. Because I think that going into 2025, it's just going to be we're going to run the piss out of the football. We're going to try and be extremely physical, and we'll see what we can do at quarterback in 2026.
Yeah, I think it's all about making it a lot easier to play quarterback for the Cleveland Browns, right? And if you have a great, like I've contended, and I don't know where you sit on this, nothing makes a quarterback's life easier, seemingly, than a great defense. Like it seems to be the great equal fire. Whenever you look at a quarterback, you're like, how did that guy win a Super Bowl? It's usually a great defense behind it, especially a great defensive line. And that's how you get results like we got in the Super Bowl. We're like, nobody's going to say that, Jalen Hurts is a better quarterback than Patrick Mahomes, except for Eagle fans. But that's not why they beat the Chiefs, right? It wasn't because they had more talent at the quarterback position. It's just look at what they have around the quarterback position, especially on the defensive side of the ball, and look at how a defensive line like that can just disrupt what a team likes to do. It's one of the things I've been preaching. Nothing helps you on offense like getting ahead of sticks. Nothing hurts you on offense like getting behind them. And the reason why you spend so much money on a defensive line, and we'll focus on that part first for the Cleveland Browns, is, hey, Myles Garrett, he's a good bet to get that team behind the sticks, right? You spend a fifth on Mason Graham because he penetrates and you feel like he can get guys behind the sticks, whether it be with the TFL himself or by creating one for somebody else. Schlesinger, really good gap filler, but also somebody who can shoot some of these gaps, get you behind the sticks. What do you feel like the Browns in this Jim Schwartz scheme, which is really aggressive, right? Going to let the guys get downhill. Their ability to execute that game plan, which is defensively, they want to get these guys behind the sticks so that they can have their corners kind of pin their ears back and have their pass rushers pin their ears back and really go after these guys.
I think for what Jim Schwartz wants to do defensively, it's always been about, like you said, getting upfield, vertical penetration as fast as possible. I think adding Mason Graham, who can do that really well. The way that they play their run defense is defensive line, fast flow, as quick as possible, and then the linebackers fill in the gaps. They're more reactive, and I think with Carson Schlesinger and his eyes at the second level of the defense is going to really mesh well there. It's kind of how JOK got so good at linebacker. It's just reacting. His
Mm-hmm.
reaction time is so quick, and he's so quick to fill downhill that I think Schlesinger is going to be a really nice replacement for him or a complement to him. So I think with what Jim Schwartz wants to do and how he's kind of morphing it when it comes to the modern NFL defense, they have the bodies to play the run up front. And I think they kind of showed that last year. It's just about, getting another dance partner for Myles Garrett. And I think that Mason Graham can do that a lot, and it'll give them so much more versatility up front to kind of pick and choose, allow Myles Garrett to pick the guy that he wants to go against, and Mason Graham will create that pressure.
All right, let's talk about that Myles Garrett, Mason Graham pairing, right? Because it's kind of been packaged as like, hey, we got Myles a pick and roll partner, basically, right? Somebody he can really play well off of, and somebody that you can also move around a fair bit, but also in places that will be complementary to Myles. Like, where do you think the Browns are going to get their most aggressive with the placement between him and Myles? And like, where do you see it playing out? Do you think it's going to be a lot of loops, a lot of stunts, a lot of twists? Like, how do you think it's going to go?
I think early it's just going to be kind of pinning their ears back and letting them go. I could see Mason Graham being involved in some of those stunts and loops on the inside, but for a large part, Myles Garrett can get his on his own. It is
Mm-hmm.
largely about finding somebody who can win when they're doubling Myles Garrett. Find somebody who can go get you a bucket outside of Myles Garrett. And I think Mason Graham can do that in isolated situations. So for me, it'd be less about um playing games and pick and rolls with Myles Garrett and Mason Graham, and more about in the fourth quarter when they're doubling Myles Garrett, Mason Graham has to go get a bucket.
Mm-hmm. Basically, they're going to be tired. They're going to shift everything to Myles. Okay, now's your chance. Go get that one there. It's going to be interesting to see how well he can translate. And like, it's hard to play defensive tackle year one in the NFL, right? Like that's very difficult transition. Given that he was taken fifth, but he does play that position. How quickly do you expect? Well, what do you expect it to look like for him year one as far as his output for the team? And how would you measure success for a guy like Mason Graham while playing next to Miles?
I think for Graham and I think for defensive tackles, it's really hard to evaluate because defensive tackles don't always get the sack numbers, sack production, unless you are truly one of one special players like Aaron Donald or Chris Jones.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for Mason Graham, a good season would be providing some consistency and stability in the interior in the run game while also creating pressure. It's not just about sacks, it's about the pressure that can really kind of help funnel the quarterback to Miles Garrett. It's got to be a team. It's got to be a team effort. So I just want to see consistent pressure from him early and often, which is something that he's been able to do when he stepped on the field at Michigan.
Yeah, I mean, even since his first year in Michigan, he was able to do that there. We talked about Schlesinger a little bit here, and then with Junkins and Dillon, what they're trying to do on the offensive side of the ball. Let's kind of flip to that. The Browns' plan, I feel like on offense is very simple. We are going to try to get away with the simplest offense that we can get away with, right? Because we don't know what it's going to look like at quarterback. Even if Joe Flacco plays for you, he's not at the point to where he's going to be able to just unleash, like year whatever it was Joe Flacco that he was in 2012, which was, it's going to make me feel old saying this. 14, was it 12 years ago? Was that 12 years ago?
2012 was 13 years ago.
So there's a whole teenager that was born and raised after that run from Joe Flacco. And then, you got Dylan Gabriel, Shador Sanders behind him, Kenny Pickett. None of these guys you're going to be like, all right, we're going to run like this super quarterback focused offense around. I've made the joke, it's going to be like 3 passing concepts for this team and just consistently trying to stay in short yardage situations to be able to nickel and dime some offenses. How do you see that playing out for the Browns? Do you think they've done enough in free agency with bringing in Tevin Jenkins potentially to play one of the tackle positions? Maybe I don't know where he's going to play, but they brought in Tevin. They also brought in Cornelius Lucas on top of already having, Jack Conklin, Wyatt Teller, Joe Bitonio's coming back. Do you think they did enough on the offensive line to be able to execute a more physical style in a way that's going to at least put them, above 28th in points scored this year?
I don't know if it's going to get them above 28th in points scored, but I do think they've done a little bit more to kind of help their run game a little bit. I think the biggest issue is largely just the health of their offensive line. Wyatt Teller was injured. Joel Bitonio missed time. Even Tevin Jenkins missed time when he was with the Bears. But I think what the Browns are doing now, they are in the first year of many of QB proofing their offense. They are trying to build an offense so good, it doesn't matter who you play at quarterback. I think to an extent, team like the Eagles has done that, where you can kind of just, you have so much talent on the roster on the offensive side of the ball that you've QB proofed it. So even when your starter has a bad game, you can still survive and still win multiple games. So I think that's what the Browns are trying to do. And I think they've done a solid first step, but I do want to see a little bit more from them in the coming years to kind of continue that QB proofing.